I'll introduce myself, Adam Perler. I'm a fellowship director for the St. Pete Innovative Foot and Ankle Fellowship. We've been in existence for 4 years, although I've been involved in fellowship education for close to almost 22 years at this point. I'm really excited about tonight because this is something I'm very passionate about, and the name of our fellowship is the innovative part, and that's something that I feel like I can maybe share and shed some light on in terms of the innovative experience. John Constantino is my fellow. He's with me, and he's going to be doing the lion's share of this presentation. So John, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is John Constantino. I'm the fellow here at St. Petersburg Innovative Foot and Ankle Surgical Fellowship here at Alexander Orthopedics in beautiful St. Petersburg. Just want to give a quick shout out to Doug, who's making all of us look a lot better than we actually are. And for some of us, it's very essential, it's very helpful, I think. But we are excited to present this lecture for you today that we've kind of developed. It's a very unique experience, especially for me as a fellow. I'm sure there's very many surgeons here that are in different parts of their career. And for me, it really matters because no matter where you are in your training, I think this is something that surgeons, foot and ankle surgeons, especially in their training, are very inadequately trained on or even discussed. So a lot of us during training have an idea when we're working, when we're doing a certain procedure where we feel like, oh, I feel like that could be done or that could be taken a different direction to make it quicker, make it more efficient. But we have no idea how to take that idea and actually turn it into something that can benefit patients and can benefit surgeons everywhere. So I'm really grateful and excited for this lecture that we have for you today. Also just wanted to introduce Dave McKenzie here. He's a patent attorney with us, and he's helped surgeons navigate these waters, and he's an expert in this. Dave, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is David McKenzie. I'm a patent attorney. I've been practicing since the year 2000, so about 22, 23 years, going on 23, with a small law firm out of Utah, and just appreciate the chance to be here and to talk about innovation and how you can protect it, and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, with that said, I think we're ready to jump into our lecture here, The Surgeon Innovator, Evolving a Concept from Napkin Sketch to Market. So first of all, we're going to talk about the two types of master chefs. And the first time I heard Dr. Perler talking about this, I thought it was really interesting because he takes this idea of being on a show on Chopped. So I don't know if any of you have seen the Food Network, but essentially in that show, there's two types of master chefs. There's those that are the cookbook kings. So these are the types of chefs that memorize the recipes, they master the steps, they manage time wisely, and they're very efficient. They're kind of masters in their craft in that sense. And if you look at the way that these cookbook kings operate in these shows, they really manage time well. And so they tend to move on to the later stages and the later rounds. And the other type of master chef is someone who's a master of the ingredients. These are the chefs that can create something new, that can think outside the box and really focus on creativity. And really, you've seen them, they've had a lot of experience, they've embraced the failure, and they know that failure is part of their success as well. So, and these are the types of chefs that really tend to do well on these shows, the master of the ingredients. Obviously, in our surgical adventure and our surgical journey, we have elements of the cookbook kings when we first start out. We memorize all the steps. We make sure that we're efficient in everything that we do. But somewhere along the line, we tend to evolve and become a master of the ingredients and really master what's in front of us. So moving on, once again, this is just going to touch a little bit and kind of bring it back to a surgical perspective. Those surgeons that are that have mastered what they do, repetition, and that's something that, in a sense, is safe because it's predictable. They know how to do what they do, and they do it well. And most of the time, these are the type of surgeons that will rely on literature. What does the literature tell us? And really having everything they do backed up by literature. And they're focused on the things that they know, and they really tend to embrace the norm. And take that idea versus someone that is creative and innovative. And that is someone that is not content with what is known. And this goes back to the idea that I was talking about earlier, where it's some part of your training or in your career, you're doing a procedure and you think there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's where kind of the innovative surgeon comes from. Someone that embraces the challenge and thinks outside the box and really challenges the norm. And if you think about our practice and some of the standards that we have now, those things were not always the standard. Someone had to think outside the box and think that there's got to be a better way to do this. One example, obviously, is the way that we now treat clubfoot, or even bunion surgery now. There's very many different recent innovations in the way we treat bunions. So those are just a few examples to note. This is a quote by Louis Toledo. To be a surgical innovator is to be someone who has the capacity to modify established concepts in surgery. The surgeon innovator is able to change old ideas and ways of practicing the specialty. So moving on to really the next couple of slides are going to just describe the earlier parts of innovation. So you're innovative, you want to work with industry, now what? And focus a little bit on the kind of playful animation we have there. And that's kind of important because when you decide you want to be innovative, you want to take things outside the norm, it's like having a target on your back. And in this case, in your front too. And so you're going to have to be able to withstand those arrows a little bit. You need to really identify who you are as a surgeon and where you kind of fall in this innovation curve. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the upcoming slides as well. Are you an early adopter? Are you someone that identifies innovation? Or are you someone that is a surgical innovator and create the innovations yourself? And I really like this slide because it kind of talks about, obviously, that innovation curve and where innovators kind of fall in that curve. Obviously, there's only a small percentage that are defined as true innovators, and those are the ones that when they see kind of, I just imagine kind of a rickety bridge going to like an undiscovered island, right? Who knows what could be over there, and they kind of just gung-ho getting ready to cross that bridge, whereas some might be checking each step, as you can see there on the right. There's a lot of different ways to approach innovation, especially kind of earlier on in our careers. There's educational consultant, a key opinion leader. You could be part of a product design team, or you can also be part of a product, or you could also be a product developer as well.
And actually, John, I was just going to chime in here. So I think all the attendings and program directors on the call tonight, we've all been one of these or all of these at some point. So I'd love to, towards the end of the discussion, come back and talk about their experiences as well. But the educational consultant, those are the people when you go to a conference, they're up on the podium, they're lecturing, they're kind of talking about their experience with the product. Key opinion leaders are basically people that have been identified as having a really great opinion on a certain subject. So you might be just doing a ton of first MPJ fusions, and an industry seeks you out because they say, hey, this person's opinion could really help us with our next plate design or ankle design or whatever they're working on. Product design team, that's when you've kind of taken a next step and you're invited to be at the table when they're starting to lay out the foundation of a new design or a new product. And then the product developer sometimes is the surgeon that will approach a company and say, hey, I have this concept and I'm looking for partnership, and they end up working with the company. So these are different contracts that you can get, and we'll go into some of the nuances of these, but John, you can have it back.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things to consider when working with industry. And this is something that's obviously kind of harped on us during training as well. Obviously, you see the piles of money there, but you got to worry, there's something else attached to that, right? But there are some pros to this. Obviously, it's something that kind of builds your brand, gets your name out there. Obviously, something that can help build your CV as well. And with working with industry comes with more opportunities to teach and lecture. It goes back to kind of building your brand and your practice, as well as, obviously, as it says in the slide, supplementary income. But there are a lot of things to be cautious of. All these points just go back to the last point. You really have to know your contract, whether or not, or the kind of employment model that you have, whether it conflicts with your employer, and how some of these industry contracts go back to, does it limit you from working with other companies? And so it really goes back to just being aware of the kind of employment model you're in, and even the kind of contracts that you end up signing with industry as well.
And just a note on that is that don't assume that you know how to read a contract. This is where getting a business attorney to read through things for you, or if you're already working as a KOL for someone, it's good if you get another opportunity to have somebody look at both contracts to make sure that there's not conflicting language, because that's the worst thing you could do, is get into a situation where you're creating conflicts between companies. So that's important to know. And I think it's always good to have somebody. I think we all kind of shy away from lawyers in a sense, but this is where they can really help you. So if you are thinking about getting involved in industry, I think it's very important to get involved early with a business attorney that can help you out.
Absolutely. I think that's something that has been emphasized with my training so much. As they teach us how to do surgery, they don't teach us how to read contracts. So definitely know what your limits are and know what you know how to do. So, all right, so you've got an idea what's next. And so now we're going to jump into the innovative process. And the first part is really knowing who you are and what you're capable of. And we're going to obviously talk about these points a little bit more in detail, and talking about what your idea really is. Is it an idea? Is it an idea for a product, or is it a company? And what are your goals? And these are really important for us to really establish who we are, because this first part, knowing you, is like the foundation of building a house, or the foundation of your idea. So you need to make sure that this is strong. This is where you kind of set everything. So as part of being innovative, which part of the N do you fall in? And this goes back to knowing who you are. Are you independent? Are you introspective? Are you involved? Are you insightful? So there's a lot of things that go into that. And going into this napkin sketch. So most ideas, as we know, obviously this, I feel like there's a lot of ideas that are kind of, whenever people talk about the napkin sketch kind of idea, I always just think about, you're together with your friends, you're having dinner, and you think, wouldn't that be fun if we designed something for this idea? You have nowhere to write it on, so you write it on a piece of napkin. But I think it's still important in this napkin phase to really define what your idea is. Is it a product? Is it a company? Because like we said, this is the foundation it's in. So regardless of what you do in these early phases, especially these early phases, this is where the idea is so delicate and needs to be protected. It needs to be nourished, and so this needs to be clearly defined. So,
and that's kind of it's listening to your inner voice, and kind of identifying a problem that you're trying to solve. And I think that's something that we start with, very early on in training. We're trained to identify problems and solve them, but the best way to do this in terms of innovation is to think differently and kind of swim against the stream in terms of coming up with some sort of solution. And the napkin sketch represents a lot of things. It's exciting. It's also scary. Sometimes you're stepping into waters that you're not really familiar with, having conversations with people that you don't really have a lot in common with in terms of background. So it is a scary step, but it's a very vital step. And you just got to be careful who you share this napkin with. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But these napkins actually, industry knows this very well. This is a really delicate time in an innovation idea where there represents a lot of excitement, but also a lot of risk in terms of not only the person who's drawing the napkin, but the people that are viewing that napkin. And we'll get into that as we go through the presentation. And
so, once again, going back into the presentation here, as part of that napkin sketch idea, you need to really clearly define your goals. And fortunately, we have Dr. Perler's goals here when he started his napkin sketch: become famous, become relevant, make lots of money, make an impact on patient care. But in all seriousness, this doesn't need to be your goals, but you do need to clearly define your goals.
What I was going to say is everybody has different goals for getting into innovation, and so these aren't these shouldn't be all your goals. That you should be kind of focused on one or two of these. But some people that I've come across in our industry, in our profession, really it is about being on the podium and lecturing and becoming famous. Some people, it's more about the money aspect of it, and what can I do to monetize this unique idea that I have. Some people, it's more about just relevancy. I want to feel important. I want to have an impact, and then or you truly just care about your patients and you just want to make everything better for your patients. And I think that all these things factor into what drives us to be innovative and what's behind that napkin sketch.
Yeah, going into a little bit more detail now, knowing your type. So I really like these next couple of slides. So this goes back to being truly honest with yourself, okay? So the kind of person you are. All right, so you have an idea, and you need to be really honest with yourself if this is something you want to spend or invest in, or you're okay with having an idea and then passing it off to someone else that can take it and you can serve as more or less planting that seed and letting them nourish it and letting them kind of run with that idea.
In my experience, this is where most surgeons fall into. They have an idea, they want to hand it to someone and say, okay, you take it. Yeah. So very few people go beyond this first box.
I've heard many surgeons throughout my training as well, and I won't name names obviously, but there's the whole conversation, oh, I came up with that idea, I could have made lots of money. I mean, how often do we hear that?
We hear that a lot. Yeah, a lot of people argue over the same ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, this is where kind of listening to your inner soul and knowing what you want to do with it is really helpful. And I think before you take your napkin sketch anywhere, identifying who you are as an innovator is really, really key to knowing what to do with that idea, how to nourish it and where to take it.
Exactly. And the next type is, this is my idea, yes, I understand, but I can't do this alone. So it's kind of like the in-between here as we kind of move towards the other end of this spectrum. So you're willing to invest in your concept, but you would love to have a partner on this to share expenses. This is something that you're really passionate about. This is your idea. In a sense, it's your baby, but you understand that you're limited somewhat in sometimes your time or your finances to invest in it. So and then the next one, my idea, I'll take it from here. This is someone that is really gung-ho. As you can see, he's strong, he's lifting weights. I'm willing to do what it takes to stay independent and have control for as long as possible. So this is their baby, they're gonna take care of it. They have the mental, physical, and financial stamina for this, so.
And I, one thing that I've kind of learned is that nobody's going to love your idea as much as you, and that's a really great thing. And it's also a key weakness at times. It's like kryptonite if you love your idea too much and you're not willing to be critical of it. So I think it's important to know where you fall on the spectrum. And I would say I started out way on the left, and I've been slowly gaining confidence as I've made friends and connections in the industry and mentors, and that's a huge part of this, is having a mentor who's been there and done that. That's really, really helped me in my career, and hopefully that's what I do with the fellowship training, and providing mentorship and kind of having others learn from the mistakes that I made, because I've certainly been tripped up by the innovative process on several occasions, and ended up with some black eyes because of it, and bruised ego and broken heart, but that's all part of the innovative process.
Yes, Dr. Perler has definitely made many mistakes. All right, so moving on to our presentation here. All right, so we need to be really honest with ourselves as well. So like I said earlier, that these earlier stages of the innovative process, we need to understand something. We need to understand that our idea is very, very delicate. And we need to understand that this whole process is really like a game. It's a game that can be played. We wish that it wasn't, but it really is. When there's money, when there's business involved, when there's multiple parties and companies involved, it is a game. And managing the innovative process is really like playing chess. And in chess, there is offense and there's defense, and there's different strategies to go about it. And there's different times to kind of keep everything, your strategy, keep them close to you, keep your cards close, and there's times to reveal those. And so just understand that it's not something that you should just go gung-ho about. There's a strategy to it, there's an offense, and there's a defense, okay? So going on to really, one of the most important parts of our lecture is protection. And this is talking about protecting your ideas. So this is kind of what not to do. And I love this slide because this is, as we kind of go throughout this slide, you're going to notice, I've done a couple of these things. I know all of us here on this Zoom or this webinar today, we've all done this, right? Especially this one. This is my favorite one because some people say I'm loud. I probably don't even need a microphone like this guy. This is my idea. I love it. It's the best. I want to share it with everyone, right? And you're on your soapbox, you got your microphone. I want everyone to see how good this idea is. Don't do that, please. The other one is, I'll just be a little bit quiet about this. I'll tell a few friends. What's the harm? Like I said, it's a game, right? So you need to know when to play offense, when to play defense. I'll just tell a few friends, and you'll be surprised what that few friends could do.
And that's usually where that conversation happens of, hey, I came up with that idea, but somebody else got credit for it.
Exactly. The next one is, maybe I'll mention it in my next lecture. And I've seen this as well. I've seen this on the podium, and then you go up to them and you just start discussing the idea, and now everyone knows the idea, right? There's a couple of people on there. I really like the animation on this next slide because it's really true. You look at this guy, he's sitting there, he has all these ideas, there's all these light bulbs coming, turning on. He's writing it all down, and there's a guy behind him just taking all the light bulbs away. And so this is really something that we need to learn, is that ideas can be stolen, right? And so you need to keep it confidential. And very fortunately, we have Dave here, who's an expert in this and is going to discuss this a little bit further, going into non-disclosure, the importance of IP and various subjects. So
yeah, thank you. Keeping it confidential is the first step. You want to keep your cards close to the chest. But one of the things you want to do is find some legal counsel who can help you protect the idea as soon as you can, so that you can then free yourself to do other to do more with it, to take it to market, and to continue the process. So it's important that you first get a non-disclosure agreement in place, or a confidentiality agreement. It's basically a contract between you and the one that you're going to share the idea with. And that can help a lot to protect the idea, but don't stop there. I recommend that you go and find a patent attorney who can help you protect the idea, someone who specializes in intellectual property, because there are steps you can take to get stronger protection than your non-disclosure agreement. So that's what I want to cover, is the intellectual property steps of how you can protect the idea. One thing to keep in mind with intellectual property is we award patents and intellectual property rights to people who are the first one to take steps to protect it. Rather than going to the market, rather than sharing it at the lecture, you want to take those steps before you have those disclosures. Before you share it with the world, you need to get some things in place first. So I recommend that you contact an intellectual property attorney to get that started so you can get filed first. So there are 4 types of intellectual property I'm going to cover. The first is patents. So patents cover the idea and the concept, and you can actually protect surgical techniques as well in the US, but not around the world. So that's something that's different from country to country. The next one is trademarks. Trademarks protects your brand. That's the name and the goodwill that your company or your product will have. The next one is trade secrets. Trade secrets are ideas or concepts, even methods of doing things, but you decide to keep it confidential, decide to keep it inside the company, keep it a secret, and protect it that way rather than going the patent route. If you go the patent route, you're sharing with the world how to do it. If you go the trade secret route, you're going to maintain that secret.
Well, it's like the Coca-Cola recipe is a trade secret. It's
right.
Not a patent.
KFC's recipe is another example, right? That's another example of trade secrets that have been very successful. Some people think they've replicated it, but they're not going to say whether they did or didn't, right?
Right.
But then you've got patents, and then copyrights just protects artwork, sculptures, writing, those kinds of things. So today we're going to focus on patents. A couple of things to keep in mind about patents. Some people think that they have a patent if they filed a application for a patent. You don't have a patent yet, you still have a patent application. It's a process. And so you can file a provisional patent application, that's the first type. Those are the fastest to get in place, they're the least expensive, and but they expire. They don't last more than 12 months. So it's just a start. You don't want to think you have a patent if you've just filed a patent application for a provisional. The full utility application is the next type. That's a regular patent application. And the patent process is a process, so it's going to take some time. You just want to get that filing in as soon as you can. So you can use a provisional to get on early, follow it on with a utility, and that can become a patent. Generally, it does become a patent after it goes through the process. You do need to know that it protects only in the country you file it in. So it depends on which country you want to get protection in. You got to choose wisely. And you can build a whole family of patents as well off of one filing. The other type of patent is a design patent. A design patent protects how the thing looks. So you'll find design patents on tire treads and tennis shoe patterns, those kinds of things. They're very inexpensive, but they're also easier to avoid, easier to get around. And then the last one is a foreign patent. There's lots of complexity on the foreign side, but basically you can get a patent in individual countries which you file in. And so you just want to choose wisely which countries you want to file in, because the costs can go up quite quickly because of translation costs and other requirements. The other thing to keep in mind is you're going to get different protections in different countries because of their different patent laws.
Dave, real quick, so you have an early phase design and a surgeon that's coming to you and saying, I have this idea, I'm still trying to figure it out, but I want to get some protection. Do they go for the utility, or is it better to start provisional, and what's the advantage of one versus the other as they're still figuring things out?
Great question. So yeah, you want to get your idea protected or filed for protection as soon as you can. So a provisional is generally recommended that way. You've got a place in line, you're first to file, and then you have that 12 months to further refine the idea and work out some of the kinks, do some prototypes, and follow on with a utility that will claim back. But if you've got it all figured out and you're ready to go, just go ahead and file the utility. It just kind of depends on where you are in that process.
Yeah, either way, you're going to have to spend money at some point. For the people that are listening, what's roughly the cost? We're not going to hold you to it, but what's roughly the cost of filing a provisional versus a utility? I know it varies, but...
So the Patent Office has some very strict requirements on the utility application, and those have to be met to file the patent application, but you don't have those same restrictions on a provisional. You could frankly file your napkin, right, if you wanted, as a provisional. I don't recommend that because you just don't have as much in there as you need, but a provisional generally runs about $5,000. Your utility generally runs about 10, so it's going to be about double. And hopefully you can get some benefits out of the provisional and leverage that when you do the utility as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about IP. I think the key thing is to try and lock up that idea, get it filed as soon as possible. We've talked about the different kinds of IP. Now there's a couple other aspects of IP you want to cover. The first is, how do I know if my idea is even patentable? And that has to do with whether your idea is new and different versus what's already been done. I'm going to cover a couple things on that here in a second. And then the freedom to operate concept is the idea of, okay, I have this idea, I want to take it to market, I want to build this product, but what if I run into someone else's patents? So a freedom to operate search or research is to determine, can I proceed? Is there going to be a patent that will block me?
So we're going back to that original Innovator. Where do they start? Do they file IP, or do they check out other patents?
So I would recommend not worrying about the freedom to operate initially. First start on the patentability. So you can either file and work on patentability after you filed, or you can do the research up front and get the information before you file. And I generally recommend that because that gives you a better feel for what the boundaries are and what you can protect.
So one thing I can say from my experience is Google Patents is great, and then there's Justia.
Justia. Mm-hmm.
Justia, and what's the other patent? Just the U.S. patent.
Yeah, U.S. Patent Office has a search.
But Google Patents, I think for those of us that are not as smart with this stuff, more naive, at the very least you can type in keywords, types of device that you have in mind, and then you're just looking for things that pull up that might sound or look similar. I can't pretend to understand half of the patent language, but you can at least look at diagrams and get a gist, and then you find somebody like Dave that can delve a little bit deeper and say, this is what I found so far. And then I think paying somebody to help you with that search really is very, very beneficial, because as you'll find out later in this presentation, you don't want to keep pursuing an idea that's at a dead end. So in IP, it can be a dead end if there's tons of IP out there that would prevent you from doing something. And it also means that people won't like your idea as much as you do, because it represents a lot of risk for them. So this is one of the risk things that you can do.
Yeah, so to get a patent, you have to meet two requirements. It has to be new and it has to be non-obvious. And it has to be non-obvious over the prior art. So if you look at this Venn diagram, I've got two circles. On the left, you've got your idea in blue, and then the prior art is on the right. The prior art is everything that already exists, the existing technologies. So it's printed publications, patents, products, everything that's been done in the past. And what you want to do is research that and see if there's any overlap between your idea and the prior art. If you have no overlap, like in this example, then you are the first one to come up with this innovation. Generally, it's a groundbreaking idea, but it's pretty rare that there's no intersection. So most people are also working to solve the same problem. You're not the only one that's kind of asked this question, is there a better way? And so you'll find that there's an overlap between the prior art and your idea. So you can't protect anything that's already overlapping, but you can protect what's not overlapping. And so you want to figure out where that boundary is between your idea and the prior art. And that's the benefit of a patentability search. So now the other outcome you could get is you get complete overlap between your idea and the prior art. And in that case, I would recommend you not file a patent, because you've basically come up with something that someone has already done. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily at the end of the road, because you can then further refine your idea and make further improvements that improve even the prior art, right? Your existing idea. And so you basically expand your circle till you get some new space that you could then protect. So it's an opportunity for innovation. So just a couple of takeaways on IP. The first is to protect your idea as soon as you can with a confidentiality agreement. The next is to do a search, do some research, because when you file your patent application, the patent office is going to do the research as well. So you might as well find out up front. And then the third is to file as early as you can, so you can beat the competition and free yourself to then go on with the next steps of innovation and getting it out to industry.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. So we're going to jump into regulation a little bit here. So what does the FDA say? So it's really important for you to really understand this slide, because it might affect how you go about your idea. All right, so there's 3 different classes that are defined by the FDA. Class 1 is low risk, so those are your wheelchair and different types of instruments. Class 2 is moderate risk, so plates, screws, other mainstream ortho devices and implants. Class 3 is high risk, so you're talking about the mobile bearing total ankle. I think Dr. Perler likes to use the STAR total ankle as an example for this. Drug delivery, implantable. So as you can see, the more invasive your idea is or your product is, the higher class that it gets. And typically the higher class, the higher cost, the higher investment in time that is required to get that out to the market as well. And so these are the types of regulatory pathways that are involved. So for your class 1 and 2, you can get a 510K pre-market notification. So basically, the device that you've developed has a substantial equivalence to something that's already on the market. Pre-market approval, PMA, is used for novel devices that are considered class 3. These are the ones that require lots of human clinical trials, and as you can see, more dollar signs.
Actually, just going back to the STAR, it took 10 years and about $45 million to get it through the FDA as a class 3. And class 3s are really restrictive, so you can't just go make an improvement and then file it back with the FDA. You have to go through a whole nother process. Where the 510K clearance, you can make improvements. So a good example would be the right total ankle line. every time they have a new improvement, they basically can file through that 510K pathway, and it's a lot easier. So that's why in the US market, mobile bearings didn't quite take off the way they took off everywhere else, because the regulatory pathway to get to market was a lot easier to go to the 510K route, which is a fixed bearing. That's why we have majority fixed bearings on the market currently.
Yeah. And so the majority of the implants and different types of devices that you will see in the vendor booths at SAM or FFAFS will be class 2. So just have that in mind when you're thinking about your idea as well. This is a nice little example that we have. So this is myself, actually, if you can't recognize me from my ears, but this is our, actually almost exactly 2 years ago to the date, our FDA validation lab. So this was a great experience for me to have. I was a resident at this time. I was scheduled to for fellowship already with Dr. Perler here. But I had the opportunity to be part of an FDA validation lab for the Better Bunion system. This is a PSI-based hallux valgus correction. So essentially for this, just to give everyone an example, you would need to have an expert surgeon, an intermediate surgeon, and a novice surgeon all complete and utilize the device that is being described on the FDA approval. And we were able to do that successfully, and obviously I was the novice surgeon in this case. So
John showed up, he thought he was going to be the expert.
I thought I was going to be the expert, but apparently I was the novice. So
So now we get into feasibility, and the feasibility, it's another part, going back to that first part, like understanding who you are, but also understanding what your idea is. And questions that you're going to ask is, does my idea make sense? Is there a market for it? Is it manufacturable? Is it scalable? Who are the competitors? And the final question, is my baby ugly? So I love this quote. It's, what is the calculus of innovation? And basically it's quite simple. Knowledge drives innovation, innovation drives productivity, and productivity drives economic growth. And so this is basically, if you're going to go down the pathway of taking an idea from the napkin sketch all the way to industry, you have to have all these aspects to get that idea through. The other thing is, again, learning also how to see yourself from an outside viewpoint, because I love this quote as well: fall out of love with your invention and look at it critically because others are going to. And so you really have to look at your idea from other people's perspectives, and it's hard to do that as an innovator. And the real question is my idea going to work, but will people buy it or want to use it? Because you might think it's the best idea, but if there's really no market for it, it's really, really hard to bring it forward. And what you see in this presentation, John had the slide earlier that said, am I in? And that was innovative, interested, invested. Well, all the ins also include, again, investment, but also industry. And these are the people that are going to be really critical of your idea, because it's going to take money to bring it forward. If you don't have it, if you're not, unless you're independently wealthy, it'll take money to bring it forward. So investors are going to have say, and obviously industry, they're going to be the ones that are going to be marketing. And here's another thing to think about: is it takes just as much time to develop a right idea as it does a wrong one. And I think I've learned this also the hard way. So I've had experience with a total ankle project that I've been working on for almost 18 years at this point. And sorry, our slides keep advancing. Wants me to get over that slide. But this is kind of like you have this idea. I'm going to run to the drugstore or supermarket, and as you're driving, we can go to the next slide. As you're driving, you just happen to remember that it's a holiday, and you're halfway there, and your goal was to get to that store and buy, a soda or something. So do you keep driving to the store because you set yourself on the process of, I'm going to go buy a soda at the drugs or at the supermarket? Or do you at that point say, you know what, I'm going to bail on this journey. It's not going to work out today, and I'm going to go home and I'll go on another journey at another point. So This is something that happens to innovators at some point, and sometimes it costs a lot of money. You get pretty far with an idea, and then you have to decide whether or not you're going to pursue it because maybe it hits roadblocks that you weren't expecting. But again, if the store's closed, it's not going to do you any good by driving that car all the way there. And that's why it's important to note that it takes a lot of time to develop a wrong idea. So failure does teach us lessons. It's inevitable. And as an innovator, you have to understand that. And that one door closed is going to be 5 doors open. The other thing is, Abraham Lincoln, for example, ran for leadership 27 times and failed. And on his 28th time, he became the most influential president, or one of the most influential presidents. Trying or not trying, really, I think when you don't try something, that's when you truly fail. So you can't really fail if you're trying. And the other thing is learning to fail fast and early. And sometimes this is embarrassing when you fall flat on your face right when you start, but it happens. And real innovators tend to bounce instead of crash. And they just basically take that energy that they got from the bounce and they put it right into their next idea. And the other realistic thing for all of us that have gone this route is to realize that we're going to eat a lot of steak dinners with people that want to hear about it, but 99 out of 100 of those dinners are going to lead nowhere. And it's only one of those that actually ever makes it into a company's portfolio. And that's a pretty light statistic. I think in reality it's probably even less than that. So to take an idea from that napkin sketch, you got to have the concept down and get the design down. You have to protect it, which we talked about earlier. We're talking right now about validation. That happens with the FDA and the regulation aspect to that. And then eventually you got to start thinking about commercialization. And on that very first slide that John had showed or earlier on, where he talked about the further right you go, the more expensive it gets for you. So as you go through this commercialization, if you're launching on your own, it really does take a lot of capital, and you got to really believe in yourself and believe in your idea, but also believe in the people that you surround yourself with. And it's really, really important to do that. This is the developmental gearing of an idea. There's a lot on this slide, and I think we've kind of talked a little bit about it, but the idea is, who is your quarterback? You can be a quarterback as long as you know what you're doing, but sometimes as an innovator, the best thing you can do is step back and find somebody to help you with this. And I think that whether it's legal help or a mentor's help or finding somebody that has industry experience that can help guide you, I think that's really important. There's companies out there that can help in these early phase ideas, and I'll talk about that here in a second. This is a really, really busy chart, but this just shows you the back door of innovation. You have all these phases of innovation that you got to take your idea through if you are looking to commercialize. But none of us on this call are experts at this. And this is where you really got to find the right people to surround yourself with. None of us went to business school, or at least I can't say, I don't know if other people on the call, but most of the physicians have not gone to business school. We don't know the industry. The backside, that picture that John showed of the doctor swimming in the pool with sharks around him, I mean, that's a real thing. And so you really have to have people that can help you navigate and play that chess game to your advantage. And I think that that's what this chart is about, is knowing that we don't know everything, and you need people to help you get through these phases, whether it's engineering and other people with expertise in the industry. So these are kind of concept considerations. What does the market look like? So how many of these are done? And what's the reimbursement? So if you have something that there's only 100 done a year and it's not reimbursed real well, you don't want to spend a lot of time or money on it, because majority of the market won't either. So you got to be pretty realistic with what your idea is going to do. And it's important to ask these questions to yourself. What are the manufacturing costs? A lot of us won't be able to answer that, but you could probably ask some people. The scalability of the idea, somebody that came to me had a concept, because I like to coach people through this process, and it was for a endoscopic version of a tarsal tunnel decompression. And it was a really cool idea, but the amount of money that you'd have to spend to get it to market and training people on it and then converting people to go from an open technique to that technique is extremely expensive. And so it's probably not the best first idea. And I'll fully admit, designing a total ankle right when I came out of residency was not the best first idea to start with, because it was a class 3 design that I had, and I didn't realize that it would be very difficult to bring to market. So, that's where I learned a lot of my failures. But those are important. You kind of learn from those. And then you got to get real. Is it feasible? How are you going to fund it? Is your spouse going to be on board with you guys, diving deep into your savings? And then finally, again, this question comes up, is my baby ugly? And the quicker you can find this out, the better, because there is a process here that plays against you. So, and that's in the idea transfer. So what is the potential landing points of this idea? Is it going to be a royalty, a licensing agreement, or are you looking to get acquired if you do launch on your own? Innovation is the unrelenting drive to break the status quo and develop anew where few have dared to go. I like it because it's almost like a Dr. Seuss-like rhyme to it, but it is a great thing. So this is basically asking whether or not they are in, and they are the investors, industry, maybe an idea incubator. Are they wanting inclusive access to your idea? Are they intrigued by your idea? Is it worthy of intellectual property? So that's asking whether or not your idea or they are into your idea. It's an important thing. And this is what we all dread. So you go to a steak dinner, the company really makes you feel good. They say, hey, Dr. Perler, this is a great idea. We're going to take this back and kick it around. And it goes through all these committees. And then 4 months later, they finally maybe give you a letter, or a phone call saying, we've decided to go in a different direction. And they don't tell you why. And so that's really important to know why they've turned something down. Were they inhabited? Was it inhibited space? Is it invisible to them? Are you infringing on somebody else's idea and they came across it in their due diligence? Are they insecure, like they don't really see the market the same way you see it? But these are all things to be aware of. The slow no can really slow down your process of being innovative. And sometimes it really discourages people because ultimately they don't want to say no really fast because they're afraid you're going to get offended and say, well, if so-and-so is not interested in my idea, why would I ever use their products? So industry understands that if they say no too fast, it's not good for them, but it is the best thing for you. So having somebody who doesn't have ties to industry that can look at it and tell you that your baby's ugly is really, really important. So that's something to be aware of with early stage ideas. So the other thing that you want to have in mind is the exit strategy. So do you want to just have somebody acquire it and give you some sort of royalty agreement, which is what most people do? If you've launched the idea, do you want to set up a licensing deal? Or have you started a company and at this point you're saying, you know what, I'm ready to be bought out of my position, which isn't necessarily the end of the idea. Sometimes it's the beginning because now it's going to have resources beyond what you have at your own dispense. So these are the things that you want to have in mind in terms of exit strategies. So these are the take-home points for tonight. I don't know, John, if you want to...
Yeah, we just touch on it. These are the things that we've discussed throughout our lecture here today. Sketch it, describe it, document it. It's really important for you to clearly define these ideas earlier on. Otherwise, you can't really move towards this pathway. Once again, keep it confidential or else you get stuck on this step. We are our worst secret keepers because we have great ideas, but just remember, don't trust anyone. You're walking around, there's sharks all around you, okay? Except your IP attorney.
And your wife and dog. They're fair.
I don't have a dog, but yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah. All right. And then once again, as we move towards this innovation process, don't waste time and energy. Really do your due diligence, do your research, make sure that your idea is really worth pursuing. I really like this last one. Find help. There's things that we're good at and there's things that we're not trained on. And so that's where having a good team really comes in handy. And sometimes having that team earlier on in the phase is really helpful as well because they can kind of help navigate us through this process.
And it's not cheap, but it's definitely cheaper than taking an idea way too far and finding out it's a dead end. So sometimes it pays better in the long run to pay a little bit up front to make sure you have the right help.
Absolutely. I think that's all we have for today as far as our lectures, but anyone that has any comments, feel free to make them now. And we're open to discussion. And
you have free access to an IP attorney,
exactly.
So he's not billing for the time tonight.
Paid for by the hour, so
So we'd love to open up the floor. Hopefully this was insightful. Hopefully people out there are maybe getting inspired to go home and start with their napkin sketch, or maybe you've been doodling as we've been talking. Just keep it confidential. Don't show anybody. And one thing I was going to say is that tonight is kind of indirectly sponsored by Immotus Medical, which is that kind of early idea center where you can go and share idea and they kind of help you figure out if your baby's ugly. And that's a company that I helped found, that was about 9 or 10 years ago. And at this point, I've actually helped coach a couple of my colleagues through the process, and their ideas have ended up in some really nice portfolios, and we've all used a lot of their products. It's really, really exciting to see other surgeons be able to do that. Redpoint happens to be my first venture at going alone and doing this process. And that's been exciting to be on that pathway. But, this is hopefully insightful, and we'd love to open up the floor to questions.
Adam, this is Andrew Bellis. There was a question from Brett regarding the first step to know your current employment contract. And he gave an example of his situation. And he's asking if this is still a current issue. I have a little bit of experience with this with my current or my recent hires for our practice. There are some corporate contracts that we have them sign that basically goes through the IP or any products that are developed as an employee are under the ownership of the practice. And this can be a little sticky issue, and some of these things can be negotiable. You may have to isolate the particular ideas with your employer if they're willing to negotiate with you. I think the protection is there just in case there's a more senior doctor that has ideas that they don't want the younger doctor to steal and then kind of create as their own. But I think there are ways around this. The second reason why I think these are in these types of contracts is because they don't want to have the employee use the employer's resources to develop these types of processes or use their patients, which theoretically or technically are owned by the employer. So I thought that was a really good question, and I'm happy to hear from Dave as far as the relationship between the employers and the employees in regards to the development.
That's a great point, and it's important to note the employers their default position is going to be that they own everything, right? And that's what the contract initially is going to say. I mean, unless you really look at it, or they've been down this road before, and so they've kind of balanced it out a little bit, but generally they're going to be one-sided and they're going to be in favor of the employer. So it is wise to read through that provision and make sure that you're still going to be able to do your own innovation outside of a company time, with your own resources, that kind of thing. Generally, that's not going to be a problem, but you just don't want to run into a dispute. So the other thing to keep in mind with these agreements is if you're already doing innovation, you've already filed some patents, those kinds of things, it's important to share that with them in the agreement so that you can exclude that. So you can specifically set it up and say, hey, everything I do for you, you're going to own, that's fine, but I'm working on these other things and those are mine, just so you know. And you can list the patent numbers and those kinds of things. That's very helpful to draw that line between what they will own and what you're going to own or retain.
Yeah, and actually, that's come into play with some of the projects that we've worked on, where I've been asked to be part of a KOL team or whatever, and I just hand it over to you and say, hey, am I in the clear to do this? That becomes really important language. I know when I joined the orthopedic group that I'm in, Alexander Orthopedics, I already had been involved in product development, and there was language in that contract. It was just a boilerplate contract that stated that if I was a KOL, if I was an industry consultant, that the practice would actually be paid, not me. And so I kind of said, hey, this is something I'd like to change. And they were super okay with that because they understood when they recruited me, who I was and what my background was with product innovation. Of course, being somebody who likes to do this, that was important to have it carved out. And, so I think it's a very good point, though, if you're, especially for the fellows that are now looking at contracts, and you do think that at some point you want to come up with your own concept or be involved in industry, to make sure that your contract allows that. And you might not know the language for that, but that's where having somebody review your contract becomes really important, to ask those questions. Hey, I want to come up with a widget, down the line, does this contract allow me to do that? And your contract attorney will be able to
help you with that.
Help you with that, yeah.
Yeah, there's one more. I have a personal comment. This is Andrew Bellis again. Regarding, I think the majority of people who are innovators may not go down this whole final path, but they're more likely to become consultants or product developers within certain companies and industries themselves. So I guess many times you see a product and you have an idea for an improvement of the product or a changing of the product or a kind of an addition to the product or technique, and you want to verbally help the company develop that product or help them develop it, but you also should get some kind of reimbursement for your effort time. So when there is an idea there in this respect, and you have your goal or your only goal is to kind of get with industry and to improve upon a product, and they're willing to take you under their wing as a consultant or as a product developer, what are the first steps would you advise to at least kind of protecting that idea and not necessarily have to go through the full IP pathway?
So I think that's a good question for Dave, because that starts with the NDA.
Well, yeah, it starts. You want to have a non-disclosure agreement in place. You really want to look at the agreements you have with them. Often the consulting agreement will include the improvements and anything that you bring to the table as a contributor. And so you have to kind of weigh whether it's a minor improvement that you're not so worried about, or whether you've really solved a big problem. Because if you have solved a really big problem, then I suggest you go back and talk to them and say, hey, I have this idea for an improvement, but I want to work out an arrangement so that I can get fair compensation or part of that. Because if you are truly an inventor, you need to be listed as an inventor on the patent. And if you're listed as an inventor on the patent, then they're going to need you to sign away those IP rights to them. And so you need to have an agreement in place and an understanding as to how that's going to go and what your piece of that is going to be.
Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think...
Andrew, can I jump in? It's Brett.
Yes.
Thank you. I've been down this road 3 or 4 times, and now that I'm working in the merger and acquisition world, buying large practices and putting them together, I can tell you every fund on the street wants to own everything the doctors do, and they're not giving it up. And it's a big deal in dermatology where they make a 30-cent cream and sell it for $80. And it's becoming a big entity, and we argue royalties back and forth. My concern is that the people in residency and fellowship don't have a choice. You get a residency program, you get selected, and you don't have a choice to negotiate that agreement. You have to accept it. And then that proceeds into fellowship and probably into career and job, because we don't have people working independently. Do you have any suggestions for those people starting at ground zero, getting forward, or should they just keep their patents and their other things under aliases? Because I caught a dermatologist who had an alias like Mark Twain and Samuel Clements, and had this huge line of products that nobody knew about, but it was under a fictitious name. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't recommend aliases. It is important that the true inventorship get included. You're right that the leverage is quite different for the fellows and the residents. And so there, I think it's about kicking around the idea in your own head, testing it out, being critical of it to see, really, is this a minor improvement that I'm okay, giving up as part of my arrangement with this employer and becoming associated with this practice?
But as residency, you don't have a choice. You get selected by a computer algorithm, and that's where you go, or you don't get one. So it's not a fair agreement, and maybe the organizational side should not allow things like that to take place.
Yeah, that's a policy question that can be taken up as far as whether that can be something can be done to change that. But you're right; it's quite unequal there, right? So there, my recommendation would be to that resident to just hold that idea, keep it secret, and look at bringing it later. Doing your research on your own. Don't share it with them yet. If they ask you about it, say, hey, do you have some ideas? You say, yeah, I have this idea, but we need to talk about it because I really think it's a game changer. But you can also test it on your own, right? You could go to a patent attorney and have them do a patent search for you to kind of prove it out. Once you approach a patent attorney, everything you share with them has to be kept confidential. There's an attorney-client relationship there that's going to maintain that as a secret. So that would be my recommendation, is to do the footwork and research on your own to really see if it has legs. Because
so going to that, or playing off that, so somebody has an idea, they come to you and they're waiting out their current residency contract because it says that they're part of a university and the university owns the idea. So in that scenario, they do all their homework, they're sure they want to file for it, but it's a game because now they got to wait to actually pull that ticket at the deli line, because if they do it before residency is over and the file date represents that, then technically the university or wherever that ownership can come back and say, hey, you did that on our dime.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on what resources they used, right? If they were using it, if they came up with the idea as using the university resources, for example, then I would say just go ahead and plan on giving that to the university. But if they really did research it, do it on their own, they're completely independent, they've kept that separation, then yeah, I just say is it a 2-year situation they'd have to wait?
Well, if they're in their first year, they have to wait 3 years.
3, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hard situation because you don't want to give up your residency and
then so going back to that same scenario, so that resident now is graduating, they're ready to file, to get that filing date as early as they can, but they're also looking at contracts for either a fellowship or for employment.
Right.
So this is where it comes into play to go and look at that contract and say, hey, I've had this concept I've been working on. I'd like to carve it out of my contract. Right. Most employers will be okay with that if you're coming with that idea.
Yeah. And what's important about that too is if you come with that idea and you have not yet filed a patent application, it's really hard to define what your idea is because you have to write paragraphs and paragraphs about your idea. But if you file the provisional patent application or utility patent application, all you have to do is list that patent number, that serial number, and filing date and title. That's all you have to do. It's all within the box of that patent application. And so it makes it very simple to identify. Sorry, it's not an easy answer, but that's what I got.
So Brad, I know you're on this call. Brad is an innovator. He's developed a lot of products that we've all used. So Brad, what's your thoughts on this? Any insight or golden nuggets you could lay out there for the other fellows?
Yeah, great, Adam. Yeah, great lecture, Dave. Appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge as well, because it's a great topic, and we need to think hard about these things every step of the way. So great job with the lecture. I would just say that it kind of innovating something to me, Adam, reminds me of like when I first got into research, and publishing papers, and you don't know what you're getting into till you're into it, and sometimes you go down the wrong path, sometimes you spend a lot of time and effort and you don't get published. It's the same kind of concept. So I think I guess my advice would be to look at it like, okay, is this something I want to really spend my time and effort into, and is it something that's going to go somewhere? It's hard to kind of know that ahead of time, but that you want to try to, as an innovator, pick those right things, as you mentioned, Adam, that it's going to be well worth your time and effort. But sometimes you do fail, but that's all part of the process. And I think, as you mentioned, Adam, relationships and kind of building your own personal knowledge as you go through those different steps of being involved with the different phases of this, that's really going to benefit you personally as you grow and learn and have good friends like Dave to help us out.
Well, and yeah, going back to to build off what you're saying, as a surgeon, some of the best times for us, unfortunately, are when we have a patient that has a bad outcome. And that's when you really have to look at what you did critically and say, could I have done that better? Or what actually failed? Was it something I did wrong? Was it the product that went wrong? Was it the patient compliance? But ultimately, that's what's going to make you a better surgeon, is if you assess your failures and build on them. And that's just like innovation. I mean, innovation, you're going to have a lot of failures. It's just whenever you're going into uncharted territory, there's not a lot of people to learn from. So you got to take your lumps and then learn from them and build off of them. So I think that's something I wanted to build off of. Is Amy Husser on by chance? Is she on the call? So Amy's a nurse that came to me relatively recently. She was introduced to me from Indianapolis, and she had a really interesting concept. And at the very early stages, it was a napkin sketch, basically. And I put her with Maywood IP and said, you got to find out if it's novel. So she went through that very early stage, and the very first drawing that she had actually wasn't novel. And so it was almost like she was very deflated because she was excited about it, and then she found out that maybe it's not the best thing since sliced bread. Well, instead of walking away and saying, okay, I'm done, she kept looking, and she used that patentability search and then said, okay, wait, what if I did it this way? So sometimes you can research a patent and find out maybe where they had shortcomings, and she was able to identify something that would actually improve the science. And I don't know, Amy, are you on by chance? I know she was going to try to log in. But anyhow, what was really interesting was her ideas for a Foley catheter, and the second leading cause of hospital-acquired infections is from catheter swap-outs. So she had an improvement. So she identified a problem, and then she went about trying to solve it. And then what she's come up with through the process has been really good. And so I think at first her thought was, I'm going to take it to BARD or one of these companies and try to negotiate a deal where they purchase the concept and I'll get some sort of royalty. And she's now starting to understand that her idea is actually quite powerful.
Well, so as Dr. Perler mentioned, I had come up with a concept. Basically, what it is a spigot guard for the Foley bag drainage spigot where the urine actually is emptied. It's a vulnerable point of bacterial entry, and that research has supported that time and time again with respect to CAUTIs. And nothing was being done. There's an aseptic practice that the nurses are supposed to implement when they access the spigot drain, which is to cleanse it with an alcohol prep pad. It's never done in the real setting for a variety of reasons. And so I wanted to come up with something that would provide a single-use device that would provide an aseptic cleanse both internally and externally to the spigot, but then also, while the spigot was in the pocket on the Foley bag, provide a complete bacterial barrier, because that gets knocked around and it's set on the floor and it's stepped on and it's dragged all over the place. And so my first couple designs, Dave helped me do research on, and we came back with some artwork that looked like we would be infringing. And so I didn't want to stop. I felt like there was a way that this could get accomplished that would benefit nurses, patients, and hospitals. And so I would just continue to toss ideas around in my brain. And I ultimately came up with a designer together, an engineer, that we worked a design out that Dave felt was novel, and we went ahead and filed for a provisional utility patent on it. I think in my experience, the best thing that I can say is to not give up on your local resources. You never know. My design engineer was somebody that I actually put a request out on Facebook if anybody could do this locally for me. And I ended up with this kid who is amazing, 26-year-old, who travels all over the world and works off of his laptop. And we've only met a handful of times, but he has been able to produce things for me that were beyond my imagination, but have solved problems. So you never know where your next connection might be. And I think the other thing to never underestimate is that there are so many wonderful people that are willing to give of their time and experience in this process. A lot of people enjoy giving back when they've reached a level of success in their lives, and believe in the karma and the mentorship that comes with that. So I have this journey's been blessed. I mean, it's been peppered with highs and lows, but kind of liken it to a big 5x5 block of ice that's got maybe a little half-inch gold nugget in the middle. And every day I swing my pickaxe at it and try and chip away to get closer to where I want to be, where this thing would hopefully scale out and help hospital systems everywhere.
Well, and if you do it right, you're going to help millions of people, which is awesome.
Well, there's 34% of all CAUTIs are caused by ascending interluminal bacteria. There's a point that could be breached where the catheter actually joins the drain, and that's manufactured, sealed, not to be broken under policy and protocol within the hospital setting, and really rarely it does. So where else are the infections interluminally coming from? And it really is that vulnerable point. So there's lots of things I won't bore you with that have changed in the world of reimbursement and CAUTI recognition that have actually recently gone in my favor. You don't have to have a symptomatic UTI. The bacterial presence is enough for the CDC to, I believe, create a strike against a hospital system at a certain number. So any closed system concept is going to be helpful. It's just, I'm at the point now where I'm just trying to figure out production. You mentioned FDA classes. You have to know your classes, your regulations, where your device falls. If you have sterilization in play, you have to know that your facilities that are manufacturing meet FDA sterilization guidelines. And so I'm still learning, but it's been a wonderful process.
Yeah, and that hits on a lot of things, Amy, that we talked about earlier, that sometimes it's hard to figure these out on your own, and it's good to bring in people and mentors that can help you navigate the waters.
Yes, and I can't believe the time that people have been willing to spend with me, and phone calls, Zoom meetings, LinkedIn. It's been phenomenal. And I've had a lot of positive feedback, and just had a first conversation with the head of infection control for Ascension Hospitals, which is where I work, through the state of Indiana. And so we started to toss around ideas, and research obviously is an obstacle, and it's a costly obstacle when it comes to, especially with Dr. Perler, with a class 3, costs a lot of money to support research. And I'm not exactly sure what my end around is with that, but I have a couple ideas, and I'll just keep thinking on it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions while we're still on, or is everybody ready to go innovate? Yes.
Adam, I think we have one last question from Jennifer. So, do patent laws differ based on state, and how are patents covered on an international level? I think you discussed it a little earlier, but maybe you can clarify that one point.
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yes. How do patent laws differ based on state?
Okay. Yeah, so the patent law is by country. So we have one set of patent laws for the United States, and it covers all of the states. So you just have to follow and meet those requirements. And then each country has their own requirements. So there are, each country will have their own laws for patents, and some are more strict and some are more lenient. It just depends. But there is a process that you can file to get foreign patent protection in a streamlined way, a more streamlined way. And that's done with what's called a Patent Cooperation Treaty, a PCT filing. And it's just a process to help you get the benefit of filing in one country carry over to these other countries. And you still have to go through and actually get into the individual countries, or Europe, there's different regions as well. But it's usually country by country, and that's why the cost can go up fairly quickly. And so you want to decide, where you're going to make it, where it's going to be sold, what your market is, so you can help choose which countries are more important. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and get out there and innovate responsibly.
Cautiously.
Yeah, cautiously and responsibly. Have a good night.
Thank you, Dr.
everybody.
Perler.
Great job.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye.